and it finally settled on Vivo Energy, which is a subsidiary of Vitol, one of the world's largest oil traders. In fact, by turnover, it is, I think, or has been the second largest company. So it's a major global player in oil. The transaction went through competition processes. From a policymaker's point of view, that the transaction essentially entailed a change in ownership, a majority stake being sold by one player to another firm in the oil industry. In line with the provisions of the Competition Act, we considered the impact that the transaction would have on jobs, on the suppliers of oil, on procurement, and on empowerment. In particular, we noted that two competitors who are also suppliers of a product to Engen had raised their own concerns regarding the impact that a transaction may have on local refineries. We engaged the merger parties and later the competitors and suppliers to fully understand the implications and to consider ways to mitigate these and to encourage the parties to find ways to mitigate these. The transaction was eventually then approved by the Competition Tribunal, and that approval was subject to public interest conditions agreed between the DTIC signed. And these will set out the public interest terms that Vivo Energy will be implementing as it takes ownership of the assets. The agreement and the tribunal, the Competition Tribunal terms provide for a number of elements. I'm going to highlight 5 key public interest commitments covering new capital investment, ownership transformation, including worker ownership, procurement of locally refined fuel, support for deeper localization in the South African economy, and job security for employees of Engen. So first, the agreement provides for significant capital investment commitments by Vivo Energy in its operations in South Africa. The company is committed to a minimum of about 10 billion rand over the next 5 years to be invested in areas like green energy, infrastructure, upgrading of its operations. Subject to feasibility, it may also invest a further 4 billion rand in areas such as biofuels production, marine infrastructure, fuels production, and other sustainable fuel production. So that's the first area, a significant capital investment commitment. Second, the agreement provides for transformation in ownership, with a large stake of the company that will be placed in the hands of workers and a black-owned firm. The roughly 2,100 employees of Engen will become shareholders in the company, with an initial stake of 5%, growing over time to 9% of equity in the company. This is estimated over time to be worth about 1 billion rand when it reaches the 9%. The shares will be held in a workers' trust. Workers through the trust will also nominate an independent director to serve on the company's board. The company will also retain the existing BEE partner of Engen that is at the moment we have present with us Putuma Ntleko from Pimbani, and Pimbani will continue to be invested in the Engen operations. And the BEE partner will have a 21% stake in the company. So that means that at the end of the period where these share adjustments will take place, the total transformation stake in the company will be 30% of the shares of Engen, up from 26% prior to the merger. I want to speak about the worker share, as there are several interesting provisions in it. The stake will be financed through a notional vendor funding mechanism so that workers will not directly have to pay for the shares, but it will instead be financed from future dividend payments. However, to ensure that the benefits of share ownership is felt immediately, workers have a guaranteed dividend that will be paid annually, worth more than 10,000 Rand per worker. This payment is guaranteed for a 5-year period, and it's not dependent on the profit performance of the company. However, should the company's profit exceed a set target, the dividend payments will increase. There are also other provisions. For example, the worker stake will be discounted by 10% and it will be financed at below prime. So that's the second element, which is the empowerment. So the big issue there is that the overall empowerment will increase as a result of the transaction, and very usefully, a core component of it will be to empower the employees of Engen as part of this transaction. Third, the agreement addresses the impact of the merger on continued procurement by Engen of petroleum that has been locally refined. Based on this, the parties sat down, both the suppliers and Engen and Vivo Energy, and the final terms that was agreed is that Engen will continue to buy fuel that is refined in South Africa from the Astron refinery in Milnerton, here in Cape Town, for a period of 15 years, and from Sasol's refinery in Secunda and the Sasolburg one for a period of up to 10 years. And this commitment has been estimated to be worth about 100 billion Rand in petroleum turnover over the next 5 years. This is on assumptions of the likely price of petroleum and the full uptake being utilized and so on. And this provides a significant buffer for local refineries and a boost to maintain and expand oil refining locally. So that covers the third element involving Sasol and Astron. The fourth element is that Engen will support additional localization efforts to ensure that the transaction has a positive impact on South African industries and regions of the country, and to expand employment in the wider economy. They will double their procurement of South African products and services. These are now the non-oil products and services for export to the rest of the African market. And this is estimated over a 5-year period to be worth about an additional 1 billion Rand over that period. Engen will also contribute 240 million Rand to the Localization Support Fund, a public-private initiative to expand local production and reduce South Africa's import bill. And as I've noted, Mr. Harold Harvey, who is the chairperson of the Localization Support Fund board, is present here today. Fifth element of the agreement that I wanted to highlight is that the agreement has significant job security provisions and some jobs growth elements. Engen is committed that no worker will be retrenched as a result of the merger. In addition to that, it's also agreed it will maintain the current aggregate employment levels. It's about 2,100 workers for a minimum period of 4 years. it will move at least 50% of Vivo's Pan-African functions to South Africa, which will bring a further 75 highly skilled jobs to South Africa, the majority of which will be held by South Africans. Engen's headquarters will be kept in South Africa. There are a few additional commitments in the agreement, such as maintaining the current proportion of procurement from Black-owned businesses and to use all reasonable endeavors to increase it further. And other elements, for example, that at least 20 additional service stations over the period ahead will be Black-owned. This agreement is a strong and a clear signal of investor confidence in South Africa's growth story and its prospects. It builds on the work by government and the DTIC to boost investment, industrialization, and economic transformation. So let me place the specific terms in a somewhat wider context. The challenge of addressing inequality has become a global policy concern. Societies are all grappling with how to maintain high growth rates in ways that creates fair societies. In South Africa, asset and income inequality has been a major challenge, and addressing these have been a major policy objective. Worker share ownership and the flow of dividends that it provides is an important means of addressing inequality in the society. The share ownership provision of 9% worker equity in the company builds on a number of similar agreements, including with Shoprite Checkers, with PepsiCo, with Dubai World in the Imperial deal, and many other transactions. With this transaction, when we sign it in a few minutes, it will bring the total number of workers covered by share ownership arrangements in the economy to 553,000 employees. 3 of the oil majors will now have worker share ownership, namely Engen, Sasol, and Astron. Astron, of course, is owned by Glencore when they bought the Caltex assets in South Africa, and all 3 have significant worker share ownership arrangements. The provision to have worker nominees on company boards is beginning to gain wider traction. This agreement now brings to 9 the number of companies with such provisions in their governance arrangements. As the world enters a new age characterized by greater global volatility and tension, industrial policy is making a comeback in both developed and developing countries. Countries are looking at ways to strengthen local and regional production of critical goods. Members of the media would have seen statements issued by President Joe Biden in the United States, positions taken in the European Union, and comments by heads of state in a number of developing countries. And it's all about trying to maintain some of the benefits of globalization and at the same time ensure local industrialization. The 240 million rand support to the Localization Support Fund will boost the efforts of the fund to identify opportunities to increase local production and assist industrialists to expand output. This is good for South Africa, and it's good for business. Engen itself thrives when consumers have money to spend and they can buy oil and put it in petrol and put it in their cars and purchase those cars or hire those cars. And all of that requires an economic ecosystem where growth takes place, and localization can facilitate that. Other companies which have contributed to the Localization Support Fund are Coca-Cola with also 240 million rand and Air Liquide with 100 million rand. Heineken committed 200 million rand to a parallel fund that will be working with the Localization Support Fund. Yesterday in Johannesburg, we witnessed the signing of an agreement between the DTIC and Microsoft, where Microsoft committed to set aside 50 million rand to be spent on R&D technology support for Black industrialist localization efforts, and to do so in partnership with the Localization Support Fund. So this brings the total funds mobilized for the purpose of promoting and strengthening efforts to industrialize in the domestic economies to more than 800 million rand. And this provides significant technical support to assist local firms to expand their production, and use this also as a platform to sell South African produced goods elsewhere in the world to boost exports. Higher rates of growth in the South African economy needs increased levels of investment. The 10 billion rand investment commitment that Vivo Energy has made comes shortly after the announcement by Volkswagen that it will invest 4 billion rand in expanding its manufacturing operations in Kariga and make South Africa the sole producer of polo vehicles globally. I attended that announcement a few weeks ago. And similarly, a 3 billion rand investment announcement by Stellantis, one of the world's largest automakers, to build a new plant to manufacture vehicles in South Africa. It follows also reports by both EY and PwC that considers the state of investment in South Africa. In the November 2023 Ernst & Young Attractiveness Africa report, it says, and I quote, South Africa attracted the most foreign direct investment projects in Africa, making up 23% of the continent's total at 157 projects, and the highest since at least 2016. Its FDI was valued at $26.8 billion US dollars and created approximately 15,000 jobs, the most in the region by a considerable margin. In April this year, last month, PwC's South Africa Economic Outlook noted, quote, according to a 2022 report by Bloom Consulting, non-residents have a moderately positive perception of South Africa's economy and business ecosystems. This corresponds with other international rankings that situate South Africa in the middle of the range of countries for investment appeal, underscoring South Africa's strong fundamentals like investor protection and corporate governance, unquote. So I raise these issues of measures to address inequality, measures to boost growth, and measures to ensure that we deepen the localization impact in the economy and grow the productive side of the economy, because this agreement that we're witnessing and signing today contributes to that national effort. During the sixth administration, which is the period that we're in of the current administration, solid foundations have been laid to grow the economy, to ensure greater economic inclusivity, and to create more jobs. It's in this context that I welcome the public interest conditions agreed and wish to extend my regards and congratulations to all the parties who engaged in this process, and those culprits are, many of them are here in the room, and they have the spurs or the stripes to show. I'm not going to say the scars, the stripes to show it. I'd also like to extend my warm regards to Chris Beck, the chair of Vivo Energy, who is not able to be with us today, and to his team for the manner in which the agreement has been finalized. When you buy an oil business, it's not the same as buying or being a portfolio investor. You want to be in the long term. You see a long runway, and building strong relations with customers, with suppliers, with regulators, and with policymakers is part of that. And we look forward to a very strong journey, continuing journey in that regard. I'd also like to appreciate the constructive way in which Petronas has dealt with the public interest concerns during the sale of their asset in South Africa. I met earlier today with Adli and the team from Petronas, where they came to say a goodbye following conclusion of the deal, and I expressed similar concerns. So with those words, then, Bongani, I'd like to conclude and give back to you.
Thank you very much, Minister Patel. We will now give the opportunity to Mr. Harvey Foster. For the benefit of the members of the media who are following us from on YouTube and Facebook, Mr. Harvey Foster is the South Africa Country Manager for Vitol. Over to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for your comments, Minister. It's much appreciated. It's been a very exciting journey for us over the last year, and we're very pleased that we are here today. But maybe if I start by expressing that Africa and South Africa has and will remain a key focus for Vitol's investment. We are very excited to have made this important investment in South Africa. And since I started the business of Vitol here in 2010, we've always looked for long-term investments to make in the country. And one notable one is the terminal that we built in Cape Town, the Bergen Cape Terminal. And this week, we are obviously extremely pleased to have announced the conclusion of the merger of the joining forces, rather, of Engen's business with our Vivo downstream business. This will form a pan-African champion. It will have over 3,900 service stations in over 28 countries. So for us, extremely exciting day. We'd like to take the opportunity to thank particularly all parties involved, including yourself, Minister, in this process, but notably also Pembani and Petronas, who over the number of years, over 25 years, have ensured that Engen has become a national champion. They've invested many billions of rand in the business, and we find Engen in an extremely good position today. We look forward to the future and the further growth in Engen's operations in South Africa and the region. And with our commitment to the major investments, which the Minister has outlined some of them, we will help transform the economy in South Africa, and particularly in areas including transitional and renewable projects. This will be for the benefit of the population. I saw today this Let's Grow South Africa Together, and I think for us that really does embrace our sentiment. We believe that the energy sector in South Africa is extremely bright, and only working together with the private sector and the government will we be able to unlock those opportunities. So for us, this is a continuation of a start of our long-term presence here in South Africa, and we're very excited about the future. So thank you very much. It's great to see you all here today. Thank you, Minister. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Foster. Minister, I think now is the time to do the actual signing. TDG, your position, and Mr. Foster. And Minister will join them to observe the signing.
We're not going to have Futuba and the team joining.
Okay, we really appreciate your presence. Thank you.
You didn't want to change, it was 15. I noticed that. I'm sorry. You're signing 10 billion rands worth of investment and 100 billion rands worth of petroleum purchases from local refineries. And R1 billion of worker ownership. Yeah, 30% transformation. Thank you very much. Pleasure.
It's good enough. It's good.
Good job. A profitable business. That's right.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you.
So, congratulations. Thank you so much. Everybody.
Oh.
Yeah.
DG. Okay, thank you very much, Minister and Mr. Foster, DDG. DG. We are going to take questions from members of the media. We'll start with the colleagues that are in the room, and I will ask for the colleagues that are following us on YouTube and Facebook to please send their questions on our WhatsApp group. We will read them to the Minister and Mr. Foster. Okay. Minister, are you the one who's on the firing line? You are alone, Minister. Thank you. Colleagues, is there any question? We'll take 3 at a time. If you can just please indicate your name and the media that you're coming from. I've noted you, sir. You can ask your question.
Sure. Hi, Minister. Paul Burkhardt from Bloomberg News. There was an investment promised by Glencore when it bought the Astron refinery, or the Cape Town refinery, and it didn't actually meet the 5-year deadline to complete that investment. So what is your enforcement mechanism to make sure that this happens this time? And actually, if you know if that's been completed, could you comment on that as well? And then also, in terms of the agreements with the the Cape Town refinery and then Sasol production, after 10 and 15 years, then what happens after that in terms of these supply agreements?
Thank you, Mike. Lulama.
Lulama Maja, SABC. Minister, Lulama Maja, SABC. Minister, just for clarity, Caltex was bought by Glencore and it changed to Estron. What is going to happen now to Engen? Is it likely going to change to be Vivo or Vitol? What's going to happen? And secondly, after the 10 to 15 years with the agreements with the oil refinery, what's going to happen to the deal? And lastly, any indications as to what's going to happen to Shell? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lulama.
Thanks, Minister. Wendell from Reuters. Minister, I just wanted to check, how concerned are you about South Africa losing its refining capacity? This obviously has a huge impact on the balance of trade portfolio. And how concerned are you that we are relying more and more on imported product, which invariably is a little bit more expensive? My second question is to Mr. Foster, please. Can please indicate how exactly the 10 billion will be spent? Did indicate on infrastructure operations. Could you just flesh that out a little bit? Are you considering a Bergen 2? Or are you considering expanding Bergen terminals? I believe that there is scope for that. My third question relates, it's both to the Minister as well as to Mr. Sila Naidu, as well as to Mr. Foster. And this is what is going to happen. You guys bought NREF essentially for the storage capacity, but what is happening with the actual refinery? Are you going to decommission? If you are going to decommission, what does that actually entail? Will it impact, for example, your operating or manufacturing license in the long term? Thank you.
Thank you, Wendell. Minister.
Well, first, thank you very much for the questions. Let me start in the order that they were asked. So, Paul, perhaps just to give a bit of background to the Glencore matter. So, Glencore bought the refinery and essentially the Caltex assets in South Africa when Chevron sold its assets some years back. And they made a commitment that they would do two things. There was a spending commitment and there was an objective commitment. The objective was to move the oil refinery, upgrade it so it could get to 100 barrels per day. And initially, the process was interrupted and slowed down by COVID. Then they had a challenge. Was it a fire? A fire at the refinery, and that delayed the implementation of the commitment. However, they've made very significant progress in achieving the 100 barrels per day commitment, and they've now achieved it. So the discussion really is, and they indicate they've achieved it below budget, at a lower cost than was estimated. We're still keen that they spend the additional money because capital spending will help to upgrade the infrastructure. It helps to give us fuel security. And in addition to that, it ensures the positive benefit of capital spending on the South African economy. So in that case, I think they have given my team the details of why the initial delay, and they were reasons that I think we could accept and understand. On the 10 to 15 years issue, Paul, that you asked, and Lulama also put a particular additional component to that. So at the moment, let's call it pre-merger, the status quo ante as it exists prior to the change of ownership. There's no guaranteed arrangement in place. These are customer-supplier contracts that are negotiated from time to time. What we've been able to secure is a legally based commitment that can now be translated into contract. In other words, the parties will still do the normal contractual arrangement. So we have something that didn't exist before, which is a longer term commitment to buying from these refineries. It's consistent with the practice that has happened in the commercial agreements, but there was no legal provision previously that required it. So that's a step forward. Within the periods, and you'll see these are lengthy periods, they split up where there's an initial offtake commitment, and then both parties are able to indicate that they want to proceed with the further period and so on. It's about building relationships, because when and as those local refineries produce product that is competitive, I have every hope that the relationship will go way beyond the minimum period set out in law or in this regulatory requirement now under the Competition Act. And I make that point because Engen historically has bought quite a lot of its product from local refineries. It also previously refined locally, and I'll come back to Wendell's question in a moment. So these are minimum periods, and then it's up to the parties in the course of the commercial transactions, we hope, to strengthen it further. Of course, government too have other policy tools available to it and regulatory measures available to it to boost local offtake. But from a competition point of view, this does represent a significant step forward. Then Lulamas asked the question, will the name change? And it is my understanding, I've been advised by Vivo Energy that they love this name. They think it's got traction in the market, and they'd like to keep this name. And so that's part of the deal. I should say that Vivo Energy, even prior to this transaction, already had rights to use this name in some localities on the African continent. And so it is expected that they will continue to use this name. So you'll still be able to get your petrol at your friendly Engen station. Let me come back to Shell, because there's a connection between that question on the refineries and Wendell's comment on refineries. And Wendell, I think the closure of one refinery, in my view, for looking at it from the impact on economic development, has not been optimal for South Africa. That, of course, happened before this transaction. And South Africa has an ambition to be able to refine more oil for use domestically as well as for supply to neighbors. And there are talks underway to see how best can we strengthen South Africa's refining capacity. When we import a product like oil, refined oil, the challenge for the economy is twofold. First, that of course that value add that's done from crude to refined is lost in the domestic economy. And secondly, the loss of refining capacity can be a challenge if ever the world is oversubscribed, where demand exceeds supply for refined product. That's not where the world is at the moment. There's spare capacity in refined product and in the refinery utilization. But of course, one has to look at not the sunny day that you have today, but also the possibility of a rainy day tomorrow. So this is something that government will keep working with the oil industry to see how we can strengthen and boost refining capacity in the country. On the question that Lulama, before I come to Lulama's question, then you did ask some questions to the representatives of the companies. Of course, it's up to them to say whether they would want to break down further the capital spending, because some of that detail is in the could be in the confidential version of the conditions, but I leave that to them, including their own thinking about refining and storage, so that they can then have an opportunity to talk to that. I want to then deal with the Shell issue, and the view that we take on the Shell issue. Of course, Shell has had a very long history in South Africa, as has Caltex, as has Engen. Shell is not closing their operations in South Africa. They're selling their assets in the same way that Engen's owner, Petronas, sold the asset, in this case, to Vitol through its subsidiary Vivo Energy, in the same way that Chevron, which owned the Caltex assets, sold that to Astron. So somewhere in the public commentary, a sale of a share became mixed up with a closure of a company and its operations, i.e. petrol stations will run dry, forecourts will be abandoned, and so on. And it's maybe the moment where the announcement was made that we do have a heightened public commentariat and commentary, given that there will be some event. I don't know if you've heard about the event that happens next week, Wednesday. So, but in a more sober-minded way, everybody accepts companies buy and sell. Shell sold its assets in Singapore, both upstream and downstream, both the upstream business as well as their forecourts. And I met earlier today with the previous owners of the Engen brand, and they're from Malaysia. So they they had also indicated to me about and had shared information on the constant buying and selling of shares by companies across the world. At the moment, it's not officially confirmed, but everybody knows there are talks around Shell's stake in Malaysia itself. And it's been reported, it may well have been reported by Reuters or Bloomberg, one of the two, that Aramco is interested in buying Shell's business in Malaysia. Shell has exited markets like Colombia and Uruguay and Paraguay, Nigeria, many different places. These things happen. They will enter markets, they will exit markets. The same with Vitol, they'll enter markets, they'll exit markets. And had it not been this heightened atmosphere that we have at the end of an administration, this probably would have passed no more than the news that Engen was due to be sold. We didn't have the same degree of navel gazing and concern, because it's understood the basic asset will continue, employment will be retained, services will be rendered, but the share and the dividend flows will change. Someone buys that share and they buy it as a concern, a business that runs, that makes money and so on. So that's really what I had wanted to provide by way of context. And our view always is to look at the long-term strategic plan of any buyer, or indeed for that matter, any seller. And if we can see a company that has a long-term vision to help us grow the economy and strengthen the impact of their business in South Africa and on the African continent as part of the African excuse me, the African Continental Free Trade Area, then we welcome that. So I hope, Lulama, that does provide a little bit of context and color to the Shell transaction. I know that these questions have been asked to the team from Vital and Vivo Energy, as well as Engen. It's your call on how much of that commercially sensitive information you feel you'd like to share. Over to you.
Capital expenditure.
So the capital expenditure question. So we will obviously evaluate that on a case-by-case basis, but the areas that we would look to focus would be the optimization of the existing assets of Engen, new infrastructure builds, and around the renewable and transitional piece. So that's what we would be able to add on that point.
Thank you. Is there any other information, Seelan, anything you'd like to add?
Maybe, Minister, if I could just shed some light on the refining side. It was always our intention to look at the assets that we had and how we could probably redeploy them. And to the point made that a large part of that has got a storage and handling capability in that. So last year we completed the engineering and reconfiguration of the assets that could now be used in terminal mode, and that's now fully deployed in that service. We also looked at some of the other assets and how we could possibly reuse that in its manufacturing context. And late last year, we commissioned the solvents manufacturing complex, which allows us to take hydrocarbons, process that into finished product that serves the chemicals industry. So we're very excited about that, and that plant is up and running. So we'd always need a manufacturing license of some sort because of that, of those running plants, which creates jobs and creates a whole range of other opportunities for people in the South Durban Basin, etc. And then there will be that part of the refining site, which we will have to demolish and dismantle. The engineering work for that has already commenced about 2 years back. And as you would imagine, it requires various phases from de-inventorizing to making safe, etc., before dismantling. It can be handed over for dismantling. And so we're in the process of dealing with that phase of the dismantling and disposal, and that work will continue over the next 3 years. And then from that, we will look at the footprint and how we could best utilize that footprint, which we believe has got potential to be redeployed into different industries outside that, which outside the petrochemical industry. So we're very excited about that as well. So that's, if I in a nutshell, high level, how we plan to look at the refining site and redeploy it.
Thank you very much, both to Harvey and to Seelan. Mark, anything that you wanted to add? You are fully covered. Great. Back to you, Bongani.
Thank you, Minister. We don't have questions from the colleagues following us online. If there's someone in the room who still wants to ask another question, we can get a second bite. Okay, Minister, it looks like Wendell, do you have a question?
Minister, I don't know if I'm pushing my luck here. Would you be
Answer is yes.
I shouldn't have prefaced it with that. Maybe I'll try, if you don't mind, to get you afterwards.
Okay, colleagues, if there's no one who wants to ask a question internally, we'll declare this media briefing ending now. Thank you.
And to members of the media, to say the Localization Support Fund chairperson is there, and the management and new owners of Engen are here in front.